Welcome, revolutionary mama, to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast. I'm Ryan Watkin, educator, mom of three, rebel at heart, and passionate soul on a mission to empower and inspire you. Here, we'll explore psychology, spirituality, parenthood, and the intersection where they all come together. We'll discover how challenges can be fertile soil for growth, and that even in the messy middle of motherhood, we can find magic in the mundane. Join me on my own personal journey as I talk to experts and share resources on education, creativity, self-care, family culture, and more. I believe we can change the world by starting at home in our own minds and hearts, and that when we do, we'll be passing down the most important legacy there is: healing. And so it is. Welcome back to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast. I'm so happy you're here. And today we are talking about one of my favorite topics of all time, which is education. Almost everything in my life, I look through this lens with, from like buying our home in a quote unquote good school district, which we can unpack a little later, to I saw an acquaintance the other day at the smoothie shop. And as I'm waiting for my smoothie, he's like, "Where are you from?" And I proceed to name all the schools that my children have gone to. He's like, "No, where are you actually from?" So I walk around looking through this lens all the time. And so really, there's nobody better to be talking to today than Melanie Stefanovic. At the start of Melanie's career, she was a classroom teacher for 10 years. In conjunction with the birth of her first child in 2016, she decided to leave the classroom and immerse herself in all things child development and parenting, from conscious discipline to microbiomes. She became a researcher for Florida Atlantic University in 2017, had her second child in 2018, then founded Cocoplum Nature School in Delray Beach, Florida in 2020. Melanie holds a master's in education from Northwestern, a master's of educational leadership from FAU, and a PhD in educational leadership from FAU as well. She is a pioneer in Palm Beach County, Florida, opening the first of its kind nature school, which received private school status in 2022. Welcome to the show, Melanie.
Wow, thank you for that intro, Ryan. I'm so happy to be here.
So, why nature school?
Oh, why nature school? Well, nature school is natural learning. That's why nature school. Because there is a natural way that humans learn and that all animals learn. And so, nature school taps into that natural development. We talk a lot about children learning at their own growing edges, and really all people, and again, all animals. Like, we do it naturally, right? We want to be stimulated. We want to be engaged. We want to learn more and do more and improve. It's just kind of it's in our nature, pun intended. And so that's a big reason why nature school, because we can take what's already in children, what's innate, what's in their hearts and their souls and their minds already, and use that as our guide when we're creating learning opportunities for them and experiences for them. And I call them the conditions for learning, right? When adults create an experience or an activity, or set things out for children, or invite them to go do something or see something, that's creating a condition, and the learning happens on its own naturally, because that's just what children do. So that's a big reason why nature school. And then also, we're not separate from nature, right? We are nature. And I think it's easy to forget, because there's so much about our day-to-day lives that are not connected to nature and are not natural. And so nature school reminds us that we are nature. We're an important part of nature. And everything that we do impacts the environment around us, for better or for worse, right? Tapping into that from the earliest stages, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that's a great point. We are nature. We come from the stars, right? So talk to me about some other conditions for learning. So you mentioned one, like off the top of my head, what comes to mind immediately is like safety, trust, connection. So maybe just like talk to me about Cocoplum Nature School and how you instill all of those, those conditions, like those prefaces to learning.
Yeah. So the conditions for learning that we create respond to the children's needs, right? So like the very most important need for anybody is that sense of safety, right? Am I safe? Am I going to be eaten by a lion? That goes back to
Yeah.
like our very earliest mankind experiences.
The
So
downstairs brain,
safety,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So safety is like a number one, right? The adults around you love you. They're looking out for you. They are secure and confident people. And so you can feel secure and confident around them. That's like the a number one most important condition for learning is that sense of security and safety. And right there with it, if that's 1A, 1B is feeling loved and valued and affirmed, right? That the adults around you see you for who you really, really are, and they love you for who you really, really are. And so, with those two things kind of in place, right? Like you're not going to be eaten, and you belong with these people, right? You're part of this group, and they value you and they love you. With those two things in place, we can go to kind of the next tier of conditions, which are like the experiences, right? So we're we're sensual creatures, meaning like we take in the world through our senses, right? And so conditions for learning means that those senses are engaged for as much of the day in as many different ways as possible, right? Because that's how we take in information and that's how we learn. So we provide all kinds of things from like fine motor activities and gross motor activities, things with textures, beautiful things to look at or to see, including, nature. We don't have to even create those. Nature does it for us. We learn through hearing and even, through tasting. We do mindful eating and mindful tea drinking, and engage ourselves that way. So with the senses engaged, the brain is stimulated and ready to go and ready to assimilate new information and create new neural pathways and neural connections, because the senses are engaged and they're activated. So those are kind of like some of the basics. We talk a lot when we talk about conditions for learning about in education. This is like not just Cocoplum, I don't think, but a lot of folks in education talk about this. We've got our academic and our cognitive realms, right? We've got our social and emotional, so our intrapersonal relationships with other people and our interpersonal relationship with ourselves. We've got our spiritual side, our connection to something greater than ourselves, whatever that is that a person believes in. And we've got our physical well-being. And so we create conditions that foster the well-being of all of those parts, right? You can't just do academic and cognitive things and neglect the spiritual, the social, the emotional, and the physical. Not only is that not going to optimize your academic and cognitive development, but it's neglecting, like 80% of you if you do like an even little pie chart, right? So conditions for learning is also about creating experiences and opportunities and activities, and an environment where all of those pieces of a child's self are acknowledged and welcomed and included.
And if you ever get the chance, if and when you get the chance to step onto the Cocoplum campus, you can feel it, you can see it. You like, it just like, it's a beautiful, wonderful, magical place. So when I think of that pie chart from my education, I think, well, academic and cognitive were the only things, maybe the biggest things. I went to Catholic school for a little stretch too. So I think there was a bit of that spirituality played in there. But I think that the old worn out traditional model says academic testing, standards, no child left behind, right? And we want to be within this range of normal or average, right? So you have a ton of experience in the classroom. You have higher ed experience. You have 2 master's degree. Like, did you have to unlearn that, it's only one way? Like, how did you become so holistic in your approach? Was that always innate, or you just like fell into it?
No, I was really successful in school because I was able to like suppress those other parts of myself, which is, I mean, that's like, right. That's really, that's how the system has been created. And that's what the system was from the very beginning. From the very beginning, the American public education system was religion, as you mentioned, in part of your education, and academics. It was really learning to read, right? It was learning to read for the purpose of reading the Bible. Yeah, I I got so far and was able to, check all of these academic boxes because I kind of suppressed those other parts of myself for the cognitive and academic pursuits. And I'm really grateful for my journey. And I think in a lot of ways, there were a lot of experiences that really that did really fill me up, even if I wasn't like totally tuned into them and noticing them at the time. And everything happened the way that it did for its purpose, and it served its purpose. And I'm also really grateful to be on this side of it now, where I feel like I'm more balanced and what's the word for it? A more balanced and integrated person. That's the word I'm going for. Because yeah, the system doesn't allow for, and it almost punishes a person who needs all of those things integrated and who is tuned in with all of those areas. It's a really, as you point out, it's a really academic and cognitive focused system. And I think there's some awareness now that's a deficit, right? That it's doing harm to children. And I think that there are programs, there's like an SEL program in every school now. But where I see it falling short is that it's kind of like, it's like an add-on, right? Like PE class is like 45 minutes a day, or maybe once a week, right? Recess is like 30 minutes a day. And it's separate from the learning. And like the SEL programs, it's like, we're going to sit down in our circle, have our little feelings meeting for 30 minutes, and then move on with our day. And it's not integrated. It's add-on, or it's separate. And so it's not really the way people really are, so by neglecting those things, can you be successful in the system? Well, yeah, that's the way the system was set up. So if you can suppress those parts of yourself, you'll go very far in the system. But then when you're out of the system, so when you're home with your family, or you're playing with friends at the playground, or you've completed that part of your schooling, maybe 12th grade or undergraduate or whatever you go on to, then what? Your whole life isn't academic and cognitive. So I think that you're right. It's a reality of traditional schooling. And I think that a lot of people are tuned into the fact that that's problematic. So I see nature schools really being like a response to that need, right? Integrating all of those pieces of a person and giving them equal importance.
Right. So SEL is social emotional learning, for those of you who haven't heard that term, just to break it down, because, these terms are like normal or, run of the mill for us, but I think that it's catching on. So a lot of people are still learning about it. So social emotional learning is, we use it throughout our day. Like, we need to integrate it with our kids in everything they're doing, basically. Yeah. And at Cocoplum, you guys are just, you're doing it. You're doing it. It's amazing. Thanks. So I think one of the reasons that I vibe with you so much is that I was also very successful in the academic realm, and I could always like put aside what I needed to put aside to hustle and get it done. And, one of the things that I'm realizing as I have grown into this journey of self-awareness, which started around 30 years old, was like, whoa, there's so much more to me. There's so much more to life there. And I had to discover those things on my own. And I think what you guys are doing at Cocoplum and schools like Cocoplum changing the way. We're creating a new vision of what education is based on our experiences, which some was good, some was challenging. And we're taking those challenging parts and we're saying, well, how could we do this better? That's the whole thing. Right. So I think it's a beautiful testament to what you're doing there. So what's your personal experience with nature? Have you always been a nature lover? Like, is it something that's baked into who you are?
Oh, yes. I grew up in Utah. And so now I'm living in a very different ecosystem in South Florida. But my whole childhood, I mean, like I can only remember being outside. I have memories of like maybe Friday night, like TGIF when they had those shows on in the evening. I have memories of that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like so many of my childhood, like my happiest childhood memories are doing things outside with my family. So my parents worked really hard and they were both employed full time for my and my brother's childhood. And so but they weren't making like a lot of money, right? So our family trips were always like the free things to do, right? We didn't like go on like a vacation every year or hop on an airplane. We went for little road trips and we went wherever we could hike and camp and fish for free. So I just have like incredible memories of this trail up a canyon that was right up the street from like my grandparents' house. And eventually we moved into the same neighborhood. So right up the street from our home. And it had like a little wooden bridge over a creek. And in the spring when we would always go for Mother's Day and make pancakes on the picnic grill for Mother's Day. And the snow would be melting, right? So the creek there was snow melt. It's freezing cold water, right? It's moving, but it's freezing cold. And I have such vivid memories of like being in that creek barefoot on these really slippery river stones in this freezing cold water. And like the exhilaration that sent through my whole body, right? Like that grounding and that being in the mountains is such a humbling experience because they haven't always been there and haven't always been that way, but they've been there for a really long time. And it really like puts everything in your own little human life into perspective. It's a beautiful and humbling experience. And I really remember that vividly from my childhood, just being in that creek and on that trail with my family. And I can see it in my mind's eye because we went there very frequently. I can see it over and over again in all the different seasons. And as I got older and I can see, my parents getting older, my brother getting older. So, really it brought me so much joy as a kid. And even when I went off, to college and kind of like lost that part of myself for a little while, I went, to school in the Midwest and, I was like busy doing the college thing. And as I said, really like heavy into the academics. I lost that little piece of myself whenever I was away from home, but every time I went back home, the first thing I did was to go up into the mountains, sometimes by myself or with anybody who would go with me, but just to like reconnect and be back in nature. So I have always found it like really, an experience that would like bring me back to feeling at home, like home with myself, right? It feels like home to be outside and out in nature. And I found that it took me a couple of years in Florida, but I found that now here too, now that I've adapted and figured out, where the spots are that speak to me and where I can do the things that I enjoy. Yeah.
Thank you for painting that picture for us. I want to be there on that creek with the freezing
magic
water running over my feet on the slippery rocks. It sounds amazing. So there's a concept called trust-based parenting, which I've heard you discuss before. Will you tell us a little bit about what trust-based parenting is and how you translate that on campus at Cocoplum? Because it seems like, whether on purpose or inadvertently, there's trust-based educating going on there. So break that down for us. Hey, it's me, Ryan. So, something I do every single day to invest in my growth, besides connecting with the humans on this podcast, obviously, is reading. Reading is where it all started for me. I was 5 when I became obsessed with books, writing them, reading them, collecting them. I love how I can get inspired with new ideas and stories and ways to grow. That's why I ask all my guests what they're reading. And finally, you can check out all the book recommendations from the experts and authors on the show in one place at raisingwildhearts.com/books. There are some life changers in there like You Are the Placebo, and a few hidden gems like Sacred Motherhood and Living, Loving, and Learning. So if you want to get your hands on your next great read, check out the full list by heading to raisingwildhearts.com/books. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. So first, what trust-based parenting is not, we juxtapose it against fear-based parenting, right? And I think that that's kind of common right now, right? We make a lot of decisions in our parenting lives to avoid risk or to avoid perceived risk or to avoid some perceived unfavorable outcome. So, we don't let our children chew whole pieces of food until they have a full mouth of teeth, right? Like baby-led weaning is like the alternative way of doing things, like giving them actual food. And we're afraid to let them like ride their bikes out front in the front of the house or, up and down the neighborhood street. We're afraid that somebody's going to call the police on us or somebody's going to take our child. We do a lot of things out of fear. And so trust is the opposite of fear, right? Trust is knowing that safety is the default, knowing that security is the default, and that's like a heart thing, right? That happens in your soul. That's not like a cerebral thing, but then cerebrally, really like in your brain, knowing like the odds of something happening are really, really, really slim. So you can go at it both ways, whatever's like speaking your language at the moment. You can take it from a heart thing, your safety and security, or your brain, like odds are things are going to be okay. So trust-based parenting, what it does is that it helps the child develop their own internal trust, right? So if I trust you to use the knife to spread your own jelly on your bread, I'm conveying a message like you are a trustworthy person. You are competent, you're thoughtful, you're considerate, you're careful, you're skilled, and you can do this. And even something as small as using a butter knife to spread jelly, it's small to us, but to them, that's a big deal, right? And so that creates in them a sense of trust. Like, yeah, I am a trustworthy. I can trust myself. And then that translates down the road to being tuned into that internal voice and that internal compass, so that when they are faced with something a little bit bigger than handling a butter knife, right? When they're at a party with their friends, their senior year of high school, or they've got the keys to the car, or they are deciding which job to take, they've got a voice inside them that they know they can listen to, rather than living a life of like self-doubt and wondering like, is this the right thing? What do I do? Should I ask other people? Maybe someone's got the answer for me. Instead of looking externally for answers or guidance all the time and feeling that insecurity, they trust their own voice inside themselves, because when they were little, we gave that to them, right? We trusted them. Their children's self-talk, their way of viewing themselves is not necessarily the things that we say to them, but it's the things that we do. And it's the way we talk to ourselves, right? So the things that we do, that we trust them, right? We give them choices. We give them some control. We invite them in to make decisions in their own lives. That's what we do to trust them. And then what we say is our own self-talk, right? Like, I I know I can do this, right? Or I'm deciding to, oh, whatever, wear these sandals instead of those tennis shoes because that feels good for me today, right? Modeling that self-talk that shows like I trust myself. I can do this. I'm competent. I'm wise. I'm tuned into my own internal voice and I can do this. They see that and that becomes their practice. So trust-based parenting is how we talk to ourselves. Do we trust ourselves? It's how we give control and decisions and power to them. And I'm not saying like give your 4-year-old the keys to the car, right? They're like things within reason. But things that we know that they're gonna be okay. And we're right there just in case, but they're gonna be okay. We trust them with that. So you're right, that does translate to that's not just a parenting technique. That is what Cocoplum teachers do, and what I would hope educators everywhere would be able to do is to trust the children, right? Know that the children are always learning and doing and interacting in their best version of themselves. They're always doing the best they can with the skills and the resources and capacity that they have. So trusting that the children are there in their best selves in that moment, and trusting that they are engaging and learning, whether that's academically or socially or physically, right where they need to be, right? That they're not ever behind and they're not ever advanced. They're always right where they need to be, and just trusting that about them, and really trusting that about the process of learning, right? I think that's really important. It's when trust is fragile and we make decisions out of fear, we start trying to control things. And that's really when everything's going to fall apart, right? When you try to start controlling other people, their actions, the environment, even controlling your own emotions. Of course, we can control what we do with our emotions, but even trying to control ourselves, that comes out of fear, and fear is the opposite of trust. So really, if we think of trust as like the basis for good relationships across the board, our relationship with ourselves, with other adults, with our children, with that you're educating, if you're a teacher, trust is like the most important, right? It's really foundational for all of the other things to go well.
Right. And before the age of 7, let's just say 7 and under for the purpose of this conversation, our children are sponges, right? And so if we're looking at our toddler with the current situation here in the house, if we're looking at our toddler when he's jumping and wanting to run on the couch, if we're looking at him going, oh, I gotta be careful, right? Our facial expression, our entire system is sending warning, warning, warning. And so essentially my thought is that if we're constantly sending these warning signals to our kids, that they're going to grow up needing to control, wanting to control, feeling scared, right? So we're undoing all of these things just through simple, trust. And what a simple concept, yet universal, in that trusting ourselves, trusting our place in life, trusting our children to be who they are and to grow into that fullest expression of themselves. I just think it's such a beautiful concept. Yeah.
It's really liberating. Once you can let go of that control, that fear-based need to control things, trust is so liberating. It makes everything more peaceful.
Yeah, it really does. We use glass mason jars for our colored pencils in the house. And I've had people say, like, glass mason. I'm like, well, they can handle a glass. And sometimes a glass does get broken. Sometimes I break a glass. I'm not going to chase after my children, telling them to be careful because they have a glass in their hand, right?
We were at the park one day and my children were climbing on a branch that kind of extended over the lake shore. And they were climbing out to the farthest reaches of the branch, and the branch was, it was a healthy green branch. I'm not going to let my children climb on like a branch without leaves that's going to be brittle and crash to the ground, right? So you make decisions, and you make observations, right? You model those observations for them. Oh, I see you're climbing on a branch with green on it. I know that it's really strong and flexible. I see you chose one that's going to be able to hold your weight. So you can, model that kind of thing. So they're climbing out to it, and there's another child playing at the park, and he goes, they have to be careful. They have to be careful. And I'm like, oh, here's this child who's heard over and over in his life, be careful, be careful, be careful. And so he's telling me to tell my children to be careful. And I said, yeah, what do you think is going to happen? He's like, they could fall. Oh, they could fall. What would happen if they fell? They'd fall in the water. Yeah, they would fall in the water. And then what would happen? They would be wet. He kind of pauses and then explains they would be wet. Water's like, like 18 inches deep, most, right? It's not like piranha infested water, right? It's just a lake, right? It's maybe like a little gross, but and when he said that, I could see there was kind of like a minute of realization. Oh, they could be wet. Like, oh, well, I guess I get wet in the bathtub every day, so maybe that's not so bad. That kind of thing, right? But I find it was cute. It was a really cute exchange, and he ran off and played after that. And my kids kept doing what they were doing. It was a sweet little reminder for me, about that process, right? Like, all right, we're worried about a jar in the house. Let's really run through if it needs to happen in our heads instead of our hearts. Okay, let's run through in our heads. What is the course of events? Somebody trips, a glass jar falls and breaks, little bits of glass go around. You have to clean them up. Maybe you're late for the birthday party because you had to spend 30 minutes cleaning up glass. Like, this is how that is the course of things.
This is life, right?
This is life.
The natural consequences of things that we do on a daily basis. Yeah.
You get a little cut from a little piece of glass. So you wash it off and you put a Band-Aid on. I really just, if you really kind of play through that, like, all right, what could really happen? Sometimes that helps alleviate some of the fear.
Yeah. So one of the things I've heard you do just in this conversation naturally is the concept called, and you might have to correct me here, but is it the play-by-play or the narration? Yeah. Tell us about that, because I've heard you do it and it's something that I use. I don't know what to call it though.
Oh gosh, it's got so many names. Pick your professional, and they call it something different. But so if you're a Janet Lansbury fan, which I am, she calls it sports casting. Because it's giving the play-by-play. If you are a Becky Bailey fan, Dr. Becky Bailey in Conscious Discipline, she calls it noticing. Lots of people call it mirroring. It really is just the act of describing what's going on. And I feel like it's the most powerful thing I discovered as a parent when I was a new parent. It shifted. If I didn't adopt that practice, let me say this. I mean, I can't tell for sure, but I've got a pretty good hunch that if I didn't adopt that practice, my parenting journey would have been entirely different, because it makes you be so present in the moment. In order to do it, right? In order to name what someone else is doing and describe it, you really have to be there with intentionality. And what it does for the child is it gives them that language for existing, and it gives them that feedback that, like, you see me, you're here with me, right? Somebody is here noticing what I'm doing and cares about what I'm doing, and that's a connection, right? That's building connection, and it really, really helps. Not just like the acts and the words and the connection, but it really helps with like emotional regulation too, right? So if fear starts creeping up, naming the things and what might really happen, the reality of it, excuse me, kind of helps like curb that fear a little bit. When somebody's experiencing really big emotions, describing it as it happens, that kind of, I think is it Dan Siegel maybe, who says, name it to tame it, right? Like we're just describing what happens, and that helps us kind of regulate ourselves. I know when, my children, especially when they were young and they'd be screaming and crying because they just didn't have the words for what was going on. Like, you can't help the biology that happens in a mother's brain, right? That sends me into panic mode too. But the fact of the matter is it's 2023. We're not, trying to run from a saber-toothed tiger. So what's helpful is for my internal siren to go off, right? So when my internal siren's sounding because my children are crying, naming it to tame it. I see you're screaming. I see tears coming down your eyes. You're screaming because the cup spilled and you really wanted the rest of that milk or whatever. That helps parent tame, right? You're naming what's going on. I'm feeling really worked up too. I see you're worked up and I'm feeling worked up. Helps me regulate, helps them regulate.
If you're anything like me, when you hear a podcast like this, or when you start to dive into a journey of, okay, I'm going to do things a different way, whatever that is for you, this is a really good first, easy, actionable step that with practice, you get better and better at. This morning, we were at the beach first thing in the morning, and my girls are very close in age, and so they have a sibling thing going on. I don't get it, but they do. I didn't have a sibling super close in age. So I look at my husband. I'm like, why are they arguing? I gave you a best friend. Like, why are you arguing with her? Right. That's like my take before, reality sunk in. So I see one of them say to the other one, oh, I really like your chair. And she creeps her foot over ever so slightly and puts her toe on the other one's chair. And I said, I'm noticing that you're putting your toe on her chair and that you just complimented her on her chair. I'm curious what you're wanting or needing right now. And she looked at me and I saw it. I saw the light bulb go on. In her eyes, she went like, yeah, that is what I'm doing. Because we're moving them right from the downstairs brain to the upstairs brain. What I'm assuming, I'm always assuming positive intent, but what I'm assuming is that she needed an emotional connection with somebody. And to get that emotional connection, she was going to rile up her sister so they could have a little scrappy time, right? And then she'd have dad and mom involved. And then she'd get that connection, right? She'd get that, okay, I'm here. We're here together, right? And so that's just an example. That's just one of many examples that it's the power of just simply noticing what's going on. It helps us calm down. We have to be in our logical thinking brain. We aren't going to be annoyed or frustrated. It's just saying what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I think it's the first and easiest thing to do is just notice and sportscast. And it opens up other opportunities for respectful parenting and connection. But you're right. It's something really concrete that you can do to practice to adopt. And then eventually it becomes not just like doing it and feeling like a little weird and forced, because anything feels like a little weird and forced at first. Right. But it just becomes like part of who you are as a parent, because it brings you that connection and that presence and that intentionality.
That's right. And trusting yourself again, right? I think we have this whisper a lot of the times for different things, the way we parent, the way something just feels a little off, right? And that's what ultimately brought me to a journey of respectful parenting, conscious discipline, gentle parenting, whatever you want to call it. There's so many names for it, right? Whatever it is. The whisper and the nudge brought me here. And little by little, I've learned different things. And I've trusted that whisper inside myself that something didn't feel right. The old school authoritarian model of I'm big, you're little, I'm smart, you're dumb, like that, it just didn't sit right for me. And so here we are, right? And here you are. And you're learning so much. And I'm talking to the people listening because I so sympathize and have a lot of compassion wherever you are in your journey, whether you're just starting out and you're going, oh my God, I don't do any of this, but this sounds like something I should do, or whether you're, seasoned. And the truth of the matter is we're here talking about these things and they work brilliantly and we still mess up. probably every single day. I can speak for myself, right? We still get things wrong. And it's just a time for and an opportunity for repair then. And we can repair that connection with our kids and our partners and ourselves.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And, always self-grace, especially in moments of thirst, hunger, or fatigue, right? We all experience that. And it is a-okay, as you said, so you do something that wasn't the ideal. You drink that water, you have that snack, you take a little rest, a little breather, and then you come back and you do that repair. And that's a beautiful opportunity for connection too, right? I would never want to go through any relationship with my children, with the students at Cocoplum, with my friends, with my spouse, with anybody, humming along, doing everything right all the time, quote unquote, right. Because there's so much good that comes out of when we're just, when we're humans and we're not our ideal selves, and then we make up. That's really fertile ground for really, really, really deep connection.
So many of the listeners are having this whisper, this gentle nudge from the universe telling them to pick a different route or to follow a dream or to take that leap or to write that blog or record that podcast and on and on and on. Will you tell us about the nudge that you got from the universe to start Cocoplum? How did Cocoplum get birthed into this world?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So Fernanda, my co-founder, and I, we had been talking about doing something like Cocoplum for a couple of years. And we would, we were young and busy, and we both had like our careers, and we were having babies. So we didn't spend like a lot of time like plotting and scheming. It would just like kind of happen by accident that we would run into each other at the children's library or the children's garden. And every time we did, we'd really connect over, these principles that Cocoplum is founded on. And we'd be like, okay, yeah, one day. And then that day came. So it was June in 2020. And, it's like June in Florida. It's like sweltering hot. It was the middle of the day. I was working from home, had both kids home. They were 4 and 2, and I was trying to work full time from home, and my husband was working full time from home. And it was, all intents and purposes, it was like, we hadn't like gotten in a rhythm yet. Let's say that.
You can say shit show if you need to.
Time to get into a groove. So I needed to take the dog for a walk in the middle of the day, even though it was June and 1,000 degrees outside. So I'm sorry for all of you animal lovers. I know it's rough on the puppy's paws. We didn't go too far. So I get to my street corner, and I've got my phone on me, and an email comes in, and my dogs are, sniffing around some bushes. And so I check this email, and it's the announcement that my children's preschool was closing permanently, not just because of the pandemic. We had expected it to reopen in August. And we get this email in June that was it. They were never reopening. I had like a visceral reaction because we really loved this place. It was on the campus of Florida Atlantic University, where I was working and finishing my PhD. They had, that constantly like revising their methods based on all the latest research. They had like a permaculture garden, and it was just a beautiful place. And I felt really good with my kids there. And so I was gutted. I was really floored. And also, just as a parent who worked full time and needed full time care, the light at the end of my tunnel was instantly darkened. And so I stood there on that street corner, and there's like these like dark clouds in the distance, like one of those Florida afternoon storms rolling in, like feeling very like ominous. But like you look the other way in the sky, and it's like bright and blue, and there are birds chirping, right? I mean, if you live in Florida, you can picture this, or if you've ever been here in the summer, like it's the difference in the sky is stark, right? These like heavy dark clouds, and then like a beautiful day if you just like turn at 180 degrees. So It was very symbolic for this moment. So I'm standing there. I'm going, well, I can either melt right here on the street corner and cry into this person's lawn and like lose control, or I can start my own school now. Those are my choices, right? I can totally lose it and get sucked into despair, or I can do the craziest thing that I have ever done. And I um, gathered the dog's leashes and walked forward on the path of doing the craziest thing I'd ever done. So by the time I got home with the dog, I had called Fernanda and I said, "It's time. Now's the time. You in?" And she was like, "I'm in." She's like perpetually the most hopeful and optimistic person you could ever meet. And she right away was like, "Yep, let's do it. I'm in." And and so there we are. That was the moment.
That's amazing. I love the paradox of the sunshine on one end and then the dark gray on the other end, right?
Yeah,
It's just,
not to
and
be
there
too
you are in the
cliche, but
middle.
it's true.
It's true. And like you held that equanimity as someone who did fall into a puddle of tears as COVID started to unroll, as someone who did just melt into her own, like, dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it. Now coming out of that, it's like, oh, that was for a reason, right? It's
Yeah,
everybody's
it
got their
was.
season for that. But it's so beautiful. And you're the girl. You're like, you did it. And it's amazing. And I just can't say enough good things about what Cocoplum does for the community of Delray Beach, Florida, what you do for the county. I mean, it's a thrill to watch you and to watch Fernanda and to watch the educators there just show up every day with a smile on your face. You're so passionate. And I thank you for leading the way and reimagining what education looks like for our kids.
Wow, thank you. It's my honor. It's my calling and it's my honor.
So let's wrap up with the 3 questions that I ask everybody. What, if anything, are you reading right now?
Well, it's a book. And it's called, I'm pulling out my phone right now and finding my Kindle app because I can never remember titles when I don't have like the physical book in my hand. Because I just open the app and it like goes right to it, right? It's called Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. And it's a work of fiction, and it's really unlike anything I've ever read. It's really cool. The chapter by chapter, it kind of switches perspective, section by section. It switches perspectives of who is doing the narrating, which is a format I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with. But one of the perspectives is an octopus in a tank in a museum aquarium, and I don't know, it's super cool. I love things that are just like just a little bit different, right? Like I've read plenty of good murder mysteries that kept me up at night,
Right.
but things that are just a little bit quirky. It's a nice way to bend my brain. I'm really enjoying it.
So
Yeah.
what's bringing you joy today?
Well, I confess, it today was a sleep in late day, so not a lot has happened yet. That brings me joy. That was really nice to sleep a little bit late. What brings me so much joy on a day like today? My children, they are like really good buddies, and it's so lovely to be like sitting on the sofa in the other room and like hear their little conversations together and how they kind of like negotiate, differences and come to compromises. And um, when one of them gets worked up, I mean, sometimes they both get worked up, right? And don't get me wrong, but this morning, one of them got a little bit worked up, and the other one like took like modeled like the deep breath thing, like so. And I could like hear like the attempt to like stay calm, right? Seeing the other person kind of getting worked up in the attempt to like be there and present and like work through things, in a way that they've practiced. And they resolved it. They figured it out. That brings me a lot of joy, especially on the weekend when we're not, rushing to be somewhere on time, and they can just really like just really be together. I love that.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so affirming too, to see them like model the ways that we speak to them respectfully and the ways that they're trying to co-regulate and regulate in their own little ways. I love that. So the last question, who or what have you learned the most from?
Oh, gee. I mean, it's a parenting podcast, so I'm not like overdoing it with my kids, right? My kids.
No, totally. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
My kids, right? My goodness, there was some quote that I read in some meme when my daughter was a baby 7 years ago that, or maybe it was like a quote at the beginning of a Janet Lansbury book or something, but it was something to that effect that, kids raise adults and not the other way around or something like that. And I was like, oh, cute. That's nice. And now here I am going like, oh yeah, now I know what they meant. It's true. I learned so much from them every day about life, about myself, about the kind of person that I want to be, about my goals.
Amazing. Melanie, thank you so much for being here and sharing your brilliance and your wisdom with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was great. This was a fun little journey to be on.